Hi, everyone. Hello, virtual judges. Hello, other competitors. Hello to the public that might watch this, probably my family. My name is Anna Costanza. I am a graduate student at the Estuary and Ocean Science Center up in Tiburon, California, and my research is titled Participatory Risk Assessment of Humpback Whale and Leatherback Turtle Bycatch in Northern Peru. So my project is a marine biological science project, though it has a very heavy GIS component, or geographic information systems. So it dips into geography as well as the social sciences. So my research really fits at this intersection of these disciplines. So I wanted you all to start by imagining that you are a fisherman and your boat is out and your net is deployed, and while it's out there, a whale swims by and gets entangled. Okay, the question is, what would you do? One, would you try to do something to just save your gear? Two, do something to hopefully save the animal? Or three, do something to save the boat because this whale is huge and your boat is small and you just need to remove the animal from your boat immediately. So if we were all in an audience, I would have you all show 1, 2, or 3, and we would vote as a group. But I'm going to make some assumptions, thinking you're empathetic to the whale in this photo, and we're going to go with number 2, you want to save the animal. So if you choose to save the animal, that means you're probably going to have to cut your net. And if you cut your net, you're damaging it. Any kind of damage to this net, especially in developing countries, can create a big financial burden on these fishermen. That also means if you're going to try to free this animal, you're probably getting pretty close to the animal. Doing that can really put you in harm's way and cause serious injury or even kill you. So the option is pretty bleak. But what if I told you that there is a map that told you when and where you're most likely to see these animals, and help give you the power to make the decision to avoid them and hopefully reduce the risk of ever having you or that fisherman even having to make the decision of what to do? It might be really nice. So we're going to go from the start and talk about what I study. So I study bycatch, which is the incidental catch, injury, or mortality of a non-target species from fishing gear. And I study this within small-scale fisheries as opposed to industrial. So these are with smaller vessels where the work is manual labor as opposed to mechanical, and the catch is predominantly for sustenance or local trade or to feed yourself. These are usually coastal fisheries, and this problem has been growing for several decades. It's still an issue, mostly because coasts are very highly populated. And in a developing country, fishing is an open resource where you have local knowledge where you can take up to support your livelihood. And you could also feed yourself. So there's a local seafood demand and dependence, which also puts pressure on these more vulnerable coastal species. And as we mentioned before, it puts a lot of financial burden on these fishermen to catch these large animals. So a removal of some of these marine mammals or sea turtles can create larger ecosystem dynamic effects and can create some nutrient cycling issues and overall shift different natural functions. So risk assessments have been shown to be a way to kind of create this preventative measure, and it's been shown to be effective mostly at the local level. It can be larger, but it's best then. So if you know the habitat use of a certain species or several species, and you know its threats, you can create a vulnerability map. And in areas where there's very few data and you have stakeholders that are very knowledgeable, you can use participatory mapping methods. So for our research, or my research, we use this approach to go straight to the fishermen to ask them about their experience out in the water. So the overall project objective is to use a low-cost, participatory approach to create maps of high risk for humpback whales and leatherback turtle bycatch and provide specific recommendations to reduce this bycatch. So we'll dive into my study area a little more. We are at the northern Peruvian coast where we have selected 2 ports, Mancora and Cancas. And in this area, there are 2 large oceanic current systems that converge and mix. You have warm water coming from the north, mixing with cold, upwelled, high nutrient water, creating a very ecologically significant area to many species. So it's a very high biodiverse area. And in this area, it's been recognized as a place for protection. So there are some proposed marine protected areas in place for the Peruvian government to establish. And these are like the national park system, but in the ocean. So they have protected measures. So two animals that we have selected for our study species are the humpback whale and the leatherback turtle that use our study area both seasonally and just temporarily. So humpback whales will migrate up the coast of South America for their breeding season up in the northern coast of Peru and Ecuador. And leatherback turtles will use the study area for foraging for gelatinous plankton. So humpback whales population is currently increasing as a comeback from whaling, but unfortunately leatherback turtles have seen a very stark and steep decrease to their populations globally. They're a very threatened species, and bycatch is a major factor to this decrease. So our methods are to learn where these animals are first, right? We have to go and find them. We have to see where they use their habitat, but overall goal is still that bycatch risk assessment. So we're using this toolbox or framework called the bycatch risk assessment, or BIRA, that is fully dependent on a GIS, or a geographic information system. So this GIS, the BIRA model, runs in a GIS that allows us to track certain points of interest, such as vessels and the animals themselves. And we know that these aren't static, right? They move in space and time. And while we have this information, there's also information about these points of interest that we need, such as gear data, animal information, or fisherman data to help with this analysis. The GIS can also host different environmental variables like chlorophyll levels, sea surface temperature, bathymetry, and that further can help with the spatial analysis of understanding the animal's habitat and its threats. So to get this information, we went and partnered with fishermen, and we used a questionnaire that was developed by both marine scientists and social scientists. And this questionnaire contained 72 questions that covered topics of demographics, conservation perceptions, as well as this mapping exercise. So the fishermen would draw on this paper map their fishing locations, their animal sightings they've seen in the past, as well as their bycatch locations. So this survey was conducted in July and August of 2019. It was conducted in Spanish, and it took around 30 to 45 minutes each. We used opportunistic and snowball sampling methods for recruitment of fishermen. We also used a key contact at both ports to introduce myself and my colleagues to the fishermen, and we received fully verbal consent before we continued in the interviews. This research was approved by the San Francisco State Institutional Review Board for Human Subject Research, so we can carry out this data collection. So in total, we completed 85 interviews, and there are 4 maps, and these maps were then brought into, again, that GIS. We used ArcMap, which is an Esri software, where I was able to place that map in space and then digitize or draw over those polygons and points and attribute it to the related data. This was then used for further spatial analysis within ArcMap. So BIRA contains several steps. The one I just spoke of was the data collection using those fishermen surveys to get data on sightings, bycatch, and locations. And the goal, again, is to have that output of risk maps, as well as those management recommendations. But I just want to let you all know there are a lot of other steps in between that I'm not speaking of today that get us to that final output. So I am in my 2nd year of grad school, and this project still is right in the middle of that whole process, but there are some preliminary results to share. So for our fishing locations that were drawn by the fishermen, the 2 main gear types that are known in the academic community and among fishermen are gillnet and longline that are most notorious for bycatch. So gillnet act as kind of underwater netted spider webs that are nearly translucent, so anything that crosses through can get captured. Whereas longline, it is what it sounds like. There's a very long single line that could be at the surface or drop to the bottom with several offshoots lines with hooks that can catch a certain target prey. So for these 2 specific fishing gear types, I've mapped them for both mancora and cancas. And here it is showing the total fishing polygon overlaps and their densities for highest fishing activity. So if we focus on Mancora with gillnet, the highest density is off the coast, as opposed to Cancas, which is extremely coastal. And if you go down to Longline, both of the ports have very coastal fishing grounds, but for Mancora, the range is a bit larger. So some small and few differences between Mancora and Cancas as ports. Their characteristics are a little different. In Mancora, on average, our sample group, their boat sizes were a bit larger, their sample crew was a bit larger, and the age was younger, as opposed to Cancas, where their boats were smaller, their crew was smaller, and the age group that we interviewed was a little older. So we have bigger boats going out a little further with a little bit of a different kind of gear type as well. So I have mapped or graphed the total entanglements of humpback whales in a fisherman's lifetime, divided by the two different ports, Cancas and Mancora. And most of the fishermen are not entangling a humpback in their life, which is really great. As opposed to Cancas, which has very few entanglement experiences, Mancora has a bit more. So those that are entangling whales, they're entangling a lot, 10 or more in their lifetime. And that's mostly coming out of Mancora. And I also graphed the entanglements of humpback whales in a fisherman's lifetime. So it seems as though Mancora experiences more entanglements, though still few for these species of turtles, but 1 to 2 or 3 to 9 in their lifetime. And this is, again, mostly coming out of Mancora, who fish a little further offshore with bigger boats and kind of a different gear type. So I've also created 2 maps showing all of the interview reported animal sighting data for humpbacks and turtles. So for the humpback interview reported data, we received 319 total animal sighting points that mapped from 2019 till all the way back till 2000, but the majority within the last 5 years. And most of these points were animal sightings, and you could see that they're more coastal sightings. This is going to aid into my habitat modeling to understand the habitat use and then to be able to relate it to its risk, which in this case is fishing. So for leatherback turtles, I have also these mapped. There's a lot fewer points that were reported, only 79. But as a team and myself, we were pleasantly surprised that there were any points reported at all because of leatherback turtles' population is so dwindling, and it is very rare to see these animals. So over half of these were live sightings, and there's a few other sighting types reported as well. So this research has several aspects of value. It will identify areas of high bycatch risk to 2 species that are very vulnerable to bycatch, leatherback turtles being at a very low population, as well as humpback whales that migrate very coastal and are very vulnerable to this interaction with fishermen. It provides seasonal risk maps, both to fishermen made accessible to ways that will be effective for themselves, as well as to the academic community. It has initiated organized conversation on bycatch. This will even be greater when we come back in late summer, where we include some government officials as well as individuals from the Fishing Association. It supports the development of those marine protected areas. It uses low-cost methods by using that questionnaire to go to the fishermen for this information. It uses open source models and provides local training. So the BIRA model can be downloaded off the web, and when I provided local training to my colleagues while I was in Peru. And most importantly, it has valued this fisherman knowledge and input. Anything that comes out of this project may be some different regulations that need to have the fishermen involvement and understanding of how it's going to change their livelihood. So their input has been very important for this process. So if you could have guessed, I did not do this research alone. I had an incredible team in Peru. I partnered with a local nonprofit, Pro Delfinas, whose goal is for marine conservation and communication. So I could not have done it without any of these individuals, Joanna, Jeff, Chiara, Clara, Adriana, Carlos, and Kelly, and many, many more, and especially all the fishermen. So I want to say thank you to my team, my committee members, my lab members, all the guidance I've received, my professors, and especially the fishermen, and of course my funders, the Rufford Foundation, the American Citation Society, the Society for Conservation Biology, and the National Science Foundation. So thank you for coming and listening to this. I look forward to our question and answer period, and good luck with the rest of your viewing of the presentations, and I hope you all stay very healthy. Thank you.